Return now to the issue of foreign policy issue of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. Joining me now to talk about this, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Great to be with you, Tony. How are you today?
I'm doing. I want to return now to the issue of foreign policy issue of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. Joining me now to talk about this, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Great to be with you, Tony. How are you today?
I'm doing quite well. I want to get your take on this ongoing crisis with Russia, this pledge now for these mother of all sanctions. You know, given that relationship with China, and you know both these countries very well, are sanctions going to be enough to stop Russia at this point?
Well, it's almost certainly not enough in that sense, Tony. It is necessary. It's something that ought to be done, should be done. I hope will be done, probably should have been done, but it's not sufficient. That is, it's not going to deter Vladimir Putin that alone. They need to know that the West is united, that everybody's willing to work on this together. I see our German friends don't seem too inclined. We know what happened with Nord Stream 2 when the Biden administration let them off the hook, and when we stopped fracking here in America. And now, you know, I'm worried about wheat prices. 25–30% of all the wheat in the world comes out of these two countries, goes through the Black Sea. But we need to make clear that these shipping lanes will remain open and we'll take care of the things that matter to every American.
How does that relationship with China, historically enemies with Russia, but now kind of cozying up in the last 50 years, how does that complicate our foreign policy right now?
Yeah, it was something we were always deeply aware of, this at least feigned connectivity between Russia and China. Perhaps it's more than that. Perhaps it'll grow into more than that if we don't do things right. These are not only two deep military powers, but they're two deep nuclear powers as well, both with capable cyber forces, capable space forces, a powerful tandem. Look, neither of these countries has too many friends. The United States has all the friends. We need to make sure that we balance this correctly. There's places where we can figure out how to work with Vladimir Putin. We ought to do that. I was reminded the other day about the work we did on counterterrorism alongside them. But there's also a natural tension, Tony. Don't ever forget that Chinese and Russians have deeply different interests. They share a long border. There's been a lot of conflict on that border. It's not a natural alliance either. But if America misplays its hand and Europe misplays its hand, we could drive them closer together. And that wouldn't be good for any of us.
No, it would not. And, you know, I know the immediate crisis is with Russia and Ukraine, but I think long term, the greater threat to the United States has proven to be, I think, China.
Tony, there's no doubt. The challenge of the next 25 or 50 years isn't going to come from Vladimir Putin. It's going to come from Xi Jinping. It's going to come from the Chinese Communist Party. They have both the capability and the intent, right? 1.4 billion people. The first or second largest economy in the world, depending on how you count it. By the way, that's the capability, the intention to be the Middle Kingdom, to fulfill the China dream. And we see that, Tony, every day. We see it here, not in Beijing, but in LA, in New York, and in Wichita, Kansas, where the Chinese Communist Party is working hard to conduct united front influence campaigns inside of our country and pure espionage, stealing our stuff, destroying millions of American jobs.
Yeah, I think the intent clearly is there with Russia, but the capability is not there. And they certainly do not have the tentacles that China has into the United States. That president, as you talked about, is almost as if big tech, Wall Street has opened the door to China to infiltrate almost every aspect of America.
Tony, they certainly have. America's biggest businesses are deeply connected. Indeed, many of our small, medium-sized businesses are connected. I always told business people, fair enough, for 40 years, 50 years, Tony, American foreign policy asked them to do that. We wanted them to engage. We asked American companies to go to China and help us develop relationships. Engagement would be the solution. We, of course, know that didn't work. If it was a good idea then, maybe, but it doesn't work today. And now we have to reverse course. And American businesses, at the very least, must stop growing their assets inside of China and stop bending a knee to them. They claim that they care deeply about human rights here at home. If somebody so much as says a bad word here in the United States, they'll come after them and boycott them. Chinese Communist Party is holding 1 million people in internment camps, conducting forced sterilizations, denying women the fundamental right to choose whether they want to have 2 children or 3 children or 4 children. and yet American corporations look the other way because they're making an awful lot of money. That is deeply immoral, and it's not good for American national security either.
No, and it's un-American by all standards. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on the show. So long.